low information voter that may view politics as something that they don't have to get involved in. And hey, nobody has to do anything, but you're going to feel the consequence of that action. And that's what my point was, in the sense that we are feeling the consequence of policies that are liberal, of the left, that inevitably you will feel their fire, because the pain will reach you, because sooner or later you run out of other people's money and you run out of people to blame. And that is exactly what liberalism relies on, for us to be divided with each other enough to and look to a human, to deify an entity, to make the idol of our lives government. Government can make Social Security solvent. Government can make Medicare solvent. Even though the numbers don't work, the unfunded liabilities, if we look at Social Security, it's filled of IOUs. Even though that is all true, no, government can make it work. We're ascribing powers to government that are supernatural. Well, they print their own money, but sooner or later that even nails us. And actually, interestingly enough, the former CEO of UBS, and let me get his exact name, Grano, I believe, had an interview. Joseph Grano, that's right. Formerly the chairman of UBS, Payne Weber, was on Fox Business, and he had an interview with Stuart Varney. And Stuart Varney was asking him about the growth of the economy and what we will see. He also followed up with him on the issue of Obamacare and the impact it's had. You say, Crane, you're really stretching this out. I know. You're the smartest audience in talk radio / television. I know you get it. I know you've been blessed with the ability to understand that a segment can continue even through a break. And you understand that when we talk about policies hitting people and people having the attitude of, hey, it's politics, therefore I don't have to get involved. It's not what I'm into. No, because it has to be, well, unless you're really comfortable with not having a say in how you're governed and how much you make and what your opportunity is, and that being the opportunities to use your godly gifts that you've been blessed with and to live up to what God has put forth for you, as opposed to what the government will inevitably point you to and limit. But I digress. Back to the former CEO of UBS, Payne Weber, Joseph Grano. He was asked about the economy and economic growth. And he was asked about how we've had what we've seen is QE forever, as Dan the Man Celia pointed out. By the way, if you're into discussing financial issues, obviously lock it in, because you can catch Dan 8 to 10 Central every morning right here on AFR Talk. He's talking about the growth, the actual growth that we have in our economy. That means GDP, a measure of production. And he is also talking about the impact of Obamacare. Listen to what this man has to say. Roll it.
We have a subsidized economy. It's not sustainable. I think next year we're all going to see the impact. But the truth of the matter is revenues, the revenue line has been relatively flat. Most of the earnings have come from cheap money or no cost of money, and from the increased productivity from all the layoffs. So that's not sustainable. So I think GDP growth next year will probably be under 2.5%. Mediocre.
What about the impact of Obamacare? Because the cost of premiums and deductibles are going to go up next year. Everybody knows it. You think that hurts the economy?
We're in a price inelastic world. You can't raise prices, but Obamacare is certainly raising the cost of medical care. Yeah. I think it's a disaster. I think what the president should have done is say, look, it's not working. Stop, step back, reassess. But the arrogance of the administration is not allowing that, and I think that they're going to have a terrible situation on their hands if they don't step back.
And you see a direct correlation between the performance of the economy and the impact of Obamacare?
Well, it's certainly a contributor. I think the sentiment of the American public, as they realize this increased cost and the fact that they can't, in many cases, maintain the relationships they have with their existing doctors, is going to have a negative impact.
Negative impact means we're going to have more pain when it comes to the economic agenda and the economic outlook. And this has been going on for 5+ years now. Now, I'm not saying this to say, oh, woe is me, we don't have power over that, we can't change. I'm saying this because when this happens, sooner or later, we are going to fix it. I'd like to fix it today, not wait years and maybe decades. Heaven forbid, once you lock in institutional power, and I'm speaking to the government and the bureaucracy. So this is impacting everybody. Obamacare is hitting young, healthy folks. They're feeling the impact of the lie and consequence of Obamacare. You say the lie. Yes, it's the lie of the year, in which he did not, only when forced to admit it, he admitted that he should not have been so declarative in his statement when he knowingly misled the country in making the statements about keeping your doctor, keeping your health care plan. So continue to follow me here. This is what liberalism is. And it continues to keep moving ahead, because how else does it gain power? How else does it sustain itself? Envy, division, yes. Pushing God out, putting government in its place. Daddy government, bad daddy. Bad daddy. Government is an awful father. Ideology that life is not sacred, rather limited amount of resources we need to divide, and we need to make the decisions over the resources. Not recognizing dominion, not recognizing innovation, not recognizing the blessings and the supernatural work of God. No. Crane, you're really speaking to the spiritual aspect of this. Yeah, because I can't deny it. I can't say, here's my economic theory, and then there's God. No. It's part of the same foundation. I don't want people to get lost here for looking at the acquisition of wealth and moving up economically as that's the end-all be-all. No, I'm not saying that. I don't believe money itself is good or bad. I believe it can be used for very good things. I believe it can be used for very bad things. It could be used to help fund a crisis pregnancy center and save lives. It could be used to fund Planned Parenthood. But when I think of those two types of organizations, and I think to myself, well, what absolutely really needs the government? Oh, Planned Parenthood, because they can't sell death. They just can't do it. They've got to distort the message. They got to change the way they distort, obfuscate in a way to get around about what they're really all about. At least, now we at least know a third of their funding, but over that when it comes to abortion. We'll talk more about that with Ben Johnson. But another way this continues is to confuse the issue, is never to be clear, to make it complex. That empowers the government to, hey, we're going to take a lot of power, and then maybe if you connect with us, we'll give you a waiver. Sound familiar? That's part of this. And people who are just getting in and understanding, wow, I always think when I think of liberal policies, how compassionate they are. I don't think about locking people into dependence. I don't think about the resources of how they're delivered with 30 cents on the dollar as opposed to 60 to 90 cents on the dollar actually reaching the resource. And when we talk about private organizations versus government spending when it comes to welfare, we just had the waste chart coming from Tom Coburn, Senator Coburn. waste, fraud, abuse, a whole host of things that we're paying for and how ridiculous it is. Now, I think it's a good idea to go through and chop those things out, absolutely. But I think the main problem is that governments in those areas, I'm not speaking to defense, mind you. I believe defense needs to be dealt with in a way where there is more efficiency. Thank you, Captain Obvious. And the money gets to the specific resources, and we don't have the type of relationship when it comes to defense where all of a sudden, if you mention defense, then we can't cut it. No. However, I do believe that that is one of the constitutionally outlined powers and responsibilities of the federal government. And I believe that if you serve this nation, the last people that should experience the type of budget trimming that we experience in our country are the people who serve us. And so the problem, is waste, fraud, and abuse everywhere, and how big organizations can do that. And we're talking about a lot of dollars, but relatively, then you talk about the slivers of dollars that is going on. No, the problem really, if you want to analyze it, is we've got a 60% welfare state going, and we've got 18 to 22% of the budget dedicated to the military. I think that, in essence, should be flipped around, if anything. And you say, wow, you just want to, what about the military industrial? Listen. I want the government to do what it is outlined to do. It's building the welfare state is actually, and this is ironic, the welfare state is actually undermining what our soldiers and our military do and are empowered to do, which is to protect our liberties. No, we're going in from the inside, making, hey, Big Daddy government a great way, which gives us these entitlement programs and people relying on those. And if you cut those, well, you're not going to be elected, so you expand it. And then when you try to reform it, speaking to the entitlement state that we have that takes up over 60% of the budget in total, I say, wait a second. People say, I've paid into this. Absolutely. And I'm not ever I'm not talking about reforming it for the people, unless by choice, for the people currently in the programs, about to go into the programs. I'm talking about the main ones of Social Security and then Medicare. I am talking about the fact that people are paying in about $100,000 and taking out about $300,000. And there are variables on the number, but bottom line, they're getting out more than they've paid in, so we can't sustain this unless, of course, we continue to increase taxes on the next generation, thereby not allowing them to grow, and it strangles the entire system, and so we have low growth, low opportunity, and people are locked into the welfare state and maintaining it, knowing you could never really truly maintain it because the structure is flawed. And when you talk about changing that, you're accused of throwing granny off a cliff, or you're not caring about people. So where does this all lead? Well, I talked about how liberalism continues to, big government, statism as we know it, continues to grow and have power, and how it sustains itself. And in the opening of this, I talked about Newt Gingrich, but more importantly, the power of communication and having the right ideas. How does liberalism continue and statism to continue to sustain itself? By silencing those who disagree with it. And that's what's at heart in the political discussion today. Because the one group that brought people through and changed things in 2010 that began under Republican president, the Tea Party, and I'm speaking generally here, had the greatest political success since the Republican Revolution in 1994. But it's about the same things, and it's about holding people to account and to their word. And that is why what has been the main message coming from the left, the D's, and the establishment right. The Tea Party is radical. The Tea Party is the problem. But they do not address the substance when it comes to the Tea Party and what they are talking about. They discuss the strategy in which they want to achieve it. Because when they go to the substance, they realize the Tea Party is going back to what our founders understood. Human nature doesn't evolve. There needs to be checks and balances in order for this great experiment to work, and recognize that if the federal government grows, we lose our liberty in direct proportion oftentimes. So this is my message. Speak up, get informed, get involved. Use the gifts God has blessed you with. Brain Durham's Nothing But Truth. Coming up, Peter Ferrara, AFR Talk.